My name is Will Actually, and yeah, of course I have a podcast. I'm broadcasting from my mother's basement to bring you All the King's Voices, a podcast where we talk to drag kings and things about gender performance and everything in between. Today's guest is an award-winning multidisciplinary artist, which means drag, burlesque, and go-go dancing. He's taken the performance scene by storm, performing with various troupes, events, and festivals across D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, Puerto Rico, Texas, New York, Colorado, and Ohio. Crowned DC's very first Mixed DC Latinx Pride in 2018, and most recently voted DC's Best Drag King in 2019, this genderful genderfucker is out to bring a whole new meaning to Mr. Worldwide, adding a little sazon and grit to the charming glitz of the world's oldest, finest wine. Ricky Rosé is more than just a performer, they're a way of life. Let's welcome Ricky.
Hello, I am Ricky Rosé. My pronouns are they or he, kind of depending on how I'm presenting, because I do a lot of different things that I'll get into later. And yeah, I am primarily a drag king based out of Washington, D.C. by way of Puerto Rico. Um,
Awesome.
Very proud of heritage there. But yeah, I do drag king, burlesque, kind of drag-less, go-go dancing. Honestly, whatever, like you name it, I do it. I mostly love being on a stage. Um, Primarily, I'm a drag king, and that's what I'm most known for. I've been performing for about 3 years now. And kind of when I started drag, something in my chest like just wanted to like explode. I had truly found like my dream and my passion. And once that happened, I kind of hit the ground running, to be honest. I immediately started reaching out to drag kings in DC. I started going to shows, I started applying for shows, and really just started learning everything I could from my in-person community as well as my online community. I'm sure a lot of drag kings know of the Facebook group Drag Kings Unite.
Yep.
Um, Connection, just like really put in the work to learn everything I could. And with that, yeah, I hit the ground running, and I was actually crowned the first mixed DC Latinx Pride within my first year of performing back in
Congrats.
2000. Thank you. And I'm currently the reigning DC's Best Drag King 2019.
Okay, okay. Congrats on that as well. That's awesome. So wait, so how did you like discover drag? Was this just like, went out to a bar and saw it? Were you doing burlesque and decided, oh, I want to try doing an act masculinely, or what was the impetus for this?
Well, sort of. Not quite burlesque, but drag, yeah. Of course, like so many others, I used to be a big fan of RuPaul's Drag Race. And I went to kind of actually right after coming out, I went to my first like real in-person drag show, and Shea Coulee was actually performing at a bar that's now closed called Town here in DC.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I like went in a pride look, and I kind of came out to her. I was just like, I love everything you do, and you have confidence to come out and blah blah. It was really like absurd. And she was like, um, but yeah, I had followed drag queens for quite some time, and something in me was like, ooh, I want to do that. But I didn't quite want to do like hyper femininity because I've battled with my gender identity my whole life and XYZ. Like it's kind of the telltale like common story of a lot of us.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I didn't want to do the feminine thing, not quite. But then fast forward, I guess a month or so. I think it was the same year. I'm not sure actually. I don't remember now.
What is
But
time though, really?
but I went to my first drag king show. It was Pretty Boy Drag here in DC. They are currently the only drag king troupe in DC that center, well, especially that center POC performers.
Yeah.
And that's really like where it like hit me. I just like I lost my Can I
Oh,
cuss?
please go for it.
I watched it. It was actually their After Dark show, so it was all like basically Magic Mike themed in layman's terms. And I saw Magic Dyke for the first time. I saw Roman Noodle because we
Mm.
all started around the same time. And I was just like, I have to do this. And immediately I went home and started practicing makeup with the crappy little eyeliner stash, like the just couple of lines here and there,
Hmm.
and the muddy contour. But yeah, I came back for their next show the following month, and at that show, I actually went up to the producer and was like, "How do I get involved?" And really, drag. I don't know if we want to talk about this now, but
Yeah.
because of that like passion that like it was sparked in me, it actually helped boost my confidence so much because I would have never walked up to somebody like some stranger and just been like, "Hi, hello, yes, I would like to get to know you," and things like even in the dating world, like I am not that person. I let people come to me, but I knew this was it.
Mm.
So yeah, that really like boosted the confidence in me to kind of put myself out there, and that really has continued throughout my drag career.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny how drag can do that to you, especially when it's like, I know this is where I need to be. I had a similar experience going up to the producer at Rebel Kings and being like, "You don't know who I am. I've done drag once. I want to be on your stage."
Yeah.
You know? And I'm sure Vegas was like, "Yeah, everyone to like that line of people, yes, just get in touch,"
Right.
right? But like for me, it was a big deal, to have that moment of saying, yeah, this is a thing that matters, and I'm going after it.
That's real. Honestly, same.
That's awesome. So, I'm interested in, especially, your look is very distinctive. I was commenting before we started that your beard is just everything. So, how did you start developing your look? Obviously, starting with primitive palette and like, the muddy contour, etc. Like, where did you get your inspiration, or how did you figure out who you are?
Yeah, so like I said, I went to my first drag king show, where really I saw Magic Dyke, Roman Noodle, Black Dynamite, like really prominent like kings known here in DC,
Mm-hmm.
um, and started befriend like immediately friend requested them on Facebook. Started joining all the drag king groups and stuff like the Drag Kings Unite and Drag King Project and stuff. And really, yeah, just started friend requesting all these different people and watching tutorials, looking up pictures of masculine contour. And then, of course, like so many others, I started following like some of my bigger idols, like well, A, Magic Dyke, I learned so much from them alone. B, like Tenderoni and Landon Cider. I really loved the way they elevated the look to be a little bit more like exaggerated,
Mm-hmm.
showmanshipy. And while I have battled with my own gender identity, I've always loved the concept of makeup, and I've always loved exploring makeup, and kind of in turn use that as a way to reclaim my femininity. So I kind of do that in drag as well. It translates beautifully
Yeah.
because I do enjoy like using a glitter beard or throwing on some blush or even like pinks and purples in my eyeshadow sometimes. Like I love being able to really bend the concept of what people think masculinity is.
Yeah. So that leads me to the question that I've been bothering everybody with, which is, what exactly is a drag king? Like, what is it to you?
Well, it is 2020, so it has evolved wildly.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I mean, yeah, of course, the easiest way to explain it to folks, especially, cisgender, possibly even heteronormative folks, or heterosexual folks, well, and hetero,
Yeah, six of one.
is the most basic way to put it is, of course, typically a female bodied person or AFAB person, emulating masculinity or male impersonation. But it really has evolved much like way further than that, especially today, with the way we are exploring gender identities in Western culture in the US specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So, gosh, I mean, part of my tagline is that I'm a genderful gender fucker. So
So good.
that's pretty much what I like. That's my definition of a drag king, a genderful gender fucker. And like, yeah, it's playing with healthy masculinity versus that toxic masculinity that we all hate.
Yes, I get that. Stage name is Will, actually, so I do the opposite. I take masculinity and make it as unhealthy as possible. But it's so hard to describe what masculinity is, and yet somehow we're able to still pick it out when we're looking at like what makes a king versus even when you're looking at like andro kings and andro queens who kind of just blur all those lines. You kind of just go, it's somewhere on that spectrum. I don't know, that's a king, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, okay, so that's super helpful. So as you're then thinking about designing your makeup and things like that, what to you helps define that masculinity, and where do you see those areas to play with femininity? Does that
Ooh.
does that sort of make sense?
Yes. Well, I'll just get close to the camera so y'all
Yeah,
can see.
yeah, please.
So I like the Lana. I want to say Lana Sider started the forehead contour. Is that correct? I think.
I'm not sure. I know Damien Deluxe has also been doing it for a long time. Yeah.
Gosh, forgive me, Damien. Oh my God. Yes, Damien Deluxe really coined like the forehead contour, so I do enjoy my own little like twist on it, I guess, my own the way it fits my face. That is like usually honestly step one right after I do my foundation, I do the forehead contour. And then yeah, I try to like make the more masculine like points of my face like deeper, like
Mm-hmm.
the inner eye and stuff like that. So I do try to masculinize like the rounder parts of my face
Mm-hmm.
to make it, well, try to make it a little more square. Kind of got a round face, but and then where I really bring in femininity is like in my eyes, or a glitter beard shouldn't be considered feminine, but look like twist. And then, sometimes I'll throw on a lipstick because also putting on foundation just like blurs out my lips sometimes. So I'm like, oh, I need a little pop.
I feel that. Yeah, I have a tendency to forget and just completely erase my lips, and then I'm like, all right, something.
Like throwing it on and it's just gone.
Yep, 100%. That's awesome. So you perform drag, but you also perform burlesque, go-go, etc. So what makes a drag performance to you? And how do you
Um,
bring in those other elements or bring drag into those other performance styles?
of course. I would say the biggest distinction between at least the drag performances and burlesque performances that I see in the scene, like the communities that I'm part of,
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest distinction is the fact that drag performances, particularly drag kings, are much more audience oriented. Like we go into the audience and interact much more. Well, almost exclusively more than like burlesque performances. Burlesque performances happen on a stage. There is like no touching, no photography. Like it's very, I don't want to say strict, but there's much more protection for the performers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, that's not saying that we're not protected as drag performers, but like much more separated in terms of audience interaction. From what I've seen,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that we lip sync. I do know a lot of burlesque performers that do lip sync. One of my favorite burlesque performers is a big lip syncer when she performs. But there's like this weird, like traditional, like old school mentality in burlesque that you don't lip sync when you burlesque perform, and so it's a little strange. But I would say those are the two biggest like distinctions. Like you will know like this is a drag performance versus, well, and the fact that burlesque is taking your clothes off. But
Minor detail.
right, a lot of us do that in drag anyway though.
Yeah. Yeah, I found it's been interesting to navigate because I actually started as a burlesque performer. And so all of my drag performances are involved at some point ending up in a jock strap. And so it can be difficult when people are like, hey, do you have like a family friendly act or a non? And I'm like, what?
What are those?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Did you not want to see my ass? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's more like I guess interesting, like when you look at like drag king history and such, like both drag kings and I guess primarily AFAB performance artists, such as burlesque artists, are so like outcasted that we all come together as one. So many drag kings and burlesque performers either do both or at least were born from one or the other because those spaces are like combined.
Yeah.
And so, going back to I guess the second part of your question, that's where like a lot of my stuff like intertwines. So I'm just like, am I doing drag? Am I doing burlesque? Am I doing drag less? Like, pick
What's
one of
in a
the
name?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. So I'm not as familiar with the DC community, just I haven't performed drag or burlesque out there. So I'm interested to hear a little bit more about what the community is like, what the performance scene is like, and what your experience has been in person as well as in the grander drag king community.
Yeah. So, oh gosh, that is a loaded question.
Say only as much as you would like video recorded.
Yeah. Say that because yeah, if any DC performers see this, not that I'm ashamed of anything, I am very vocal, but they'll laugh along with me when I say that it's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Um, I guess what the easiest way to put it is the DC drag community, particular, well, even the DC performance scene and nightlife community has so much talent and skill and creativity and determination and potential to really put our city on the map as one of those staple communities, especially because we have so many performers in the city. Um, but unfortunately, there are a handful of drag queens that really, really still have that old school, I wouldn't even call it pageantry mindset because it goes beyond that. It's really the like drag race culture that the show has created. Um, and they've kind of created their like very tight knit and have a very tight grasp on the I guess the business side of things and the community as a whole, and really, really, unfortunately, ostracize a lot of already marginalized and ostracized performers in the city, um, and ruin it with their petty nonsense.
Yeah.
So,
I feel that. I feel like that's a pervasive problem in a lot of cities.
right, of course, we are not the first nor the last and the only, et cetera, et cetera. But it is very, very prevalent here. I think particularly because DC is like such a gentrified city and like still continuing to be gentrified, and especially with like the politics on the Hill and stuff like that. So the culture of DC is has become so whitewashed over the past like 20 years alone, I would say. And so I mean we are thriving and we're making it happen, but there's a lot of change that needs to happen and a lot of change that needs to come.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way to explain it, but I can also go deeper if you'd like.
Yeah, please. This is your platform, so.
Sure. Gosh, I could probably talk all day about this. I have a unique experience, and I try to remain humble and like not cocky or per se, but I do pride myself as one of the main kings who has really, really torn down barriers in DC. Because like I mentioned, like Magic Dyke started shortly before me doing drag, so Dyke has been around longer than I have. And I love them dearly, and they have put in so much good work. But when I started drag, I did start with this drag king troupe, Pretty Boy Drag. I'm no longer with them anymore. But when I started, almost everybody I talked to was just like, no, we don't work with queens. Like, we just don't do it. Like, there's a longstanding history of, oh gosh, yeah, let me get into it. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So even before I entered the DC scene, there was a drag king troupe called DC Kings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they started 15, 20 years ago. Like they are very long standing, and they were around for like 15 or so years. It was run by Ken Vegas,
Mm-hmm.
who a lot of folks know in the drag king history world. Um, and there were, gosh, where do I even like, so really even from like that era, there was this like unspoken Cold War between queens and kings.
Okay.
Drag kings were very much pushed into quite literally like basement bars and stuff, and they were thriving and made their own community for sure. But it was, yeah, it was very rigid. It was like you either perform with queens or you perform with us.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't, you know, I would even say you weren't allowed to perform with queens, from the kind of drag king mentality. It was just like, no, we just don't go over there.
Yeah.
Fast forward, DC Kings, I guess, dispersed or like
Disbanded?
yeah, there we go, disbanded. And from that was really born Pretty Boy Drag. Ricky King saw a need for a black king space, but when you talked to like some of the black kings that were even involved with creating it, basically they got a little bit of backlash because, you know, back then, not that it was forever ago, but, you know, a couple years ago, people were still like, well, why are we going to be exclusionary to everybody else then, like, type of thing. So it was like seen as exclusionary to a point.
Mm-hmm.
So they did make it all POC with like, I guess, a handful of like white kings that were part of DC Kings, but because DC Kings had disbanded and they had no home really, because really getting booked as a troupe was the thing to do, they joined Pretty Boy Drag and such. Blah blah blah. I hope that like doesn't
Yeah, that makes sense.
be cool.
Yeah.
I definitely don't want to put words in anybody's mouths or anything like that. I want to make sure I'm doing things justice. So then I joined while they were 2 years in. And yeah, I was told really quite from the jump that we just don't work with queens because that kind of Cold War has continued. And me being me, I was like, fuck that. I want to, not only do I want to be on these stages, I deserve to be on these stages.
Fuck yes.
And I immediately started performing with other performance troupes. That's where I started burlesque then with DC Girly Show when they were around. And then I joined not joined because they're not like a troupe, but I started performing with the DC Weirdo Show, who has also been around for 13 years. And so like, quick little thing about the DC Weirdo Show, they started as like a sideshow performance group, but really have evolved to become a home for like really like the most marginalized performers out there, like drag kings, AFAB performers, trans performers, particularly POC performers, and they have just done like wonderful work for the community as a whole, so shout out to them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And but then from there, like once I started like learning more skills and really elevating like not just my makeup but my costuming and my choreography and such, that's when I started going to these queen shows in drag and talking to these queens and like, how do I get on this stage, how do I get there. Really the first and only queen for a while that kind of heard that and ran with it was Desiree Dick. And she is like our premier DC monster queen. And she has put in a lot of work as well. She has come a long way as well. Like she totally owns her history and her past of, you know, not always necessarily saying the right things on the mic and such like that, but she has grown astronomically and now is also like a lot of her shows are also a home for a lot of marginalized performers, and has really given us the confidence to create our own spaces. And like I think one by one, as more of us entered the scene and found our voice, like then we started coming together. So like, yes, while I will kind of take, that like I guess props for like breaking down a lot of these major barriers. Of course, I would be remiss to say that I did it like all alone. Like as we started breaking these down, then like Magic Dyke and I started branching out. Their non-binary performer Devoid has put on amazing sold out over capacity shows. And even like a burlesque troupe that I'm part of, Manic Pixie Nightmares, who is
Great name.
who sends her POC as well. Our last show before all this nonsense happened was the anniversary show, and we also sold out over capacity. So it's very clear that there is a need for these spaces and a want for them. Like people will show up.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of folks who are threatened by our success. And instead of recognizing that we all deserve a seat at the table, and if we all really truly work together, we can be something powerful and magical. Instead, they've really tightened their grip. And honestly, you know what? I'm going to put it out there. They are proud to claim themselves like they are self-proclaimed bullies and mean girls, is what they call themselves as a joke. And that's really unfortunate because there are so many drag kings in the city that deserve a platform and need to be heard. So, gosh, I think that
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, and yet it still blows my mind that there are people who bring the bullying and the mean girl and the gatekeeping and all of that mentality into something that is supposed to be joyous and about community and sharing and building and learning from each other. Like, I mean, even just hearing you speak, right? You talked about going to a show and finding inspiration and not stealing from other people or taking their space, but learning from them and helping to pave a way for even some of those people to come into new space. Like, the fact that people can't see that that's a thing, like,
yes,
I'm not surprised, but it still blows my mind.
yeah, I unfortunately have faced a lot of backlash from it. I've been made fun of. I know there are group chats because I've seen screenshots. Um, and I've even unfortunately been blacklisted from a lot of shows. So I guess to answer, the other part of your question of how this has affected my drag career as a whole,
Yeah.
because of that, I've also traveled a lot. I was not receiving, the support and, love that I was hoping that I would receive in my own city. And so I just got out there and like with less than 6 months of drag under my belt, I applied to the Austin International Drag Festival for the first time and got in, and I was like, literally, how in the world did this happen? But that's really where I think, honestly, well, no, that's not where things took off. Around the same time that I really started like diving deep into drag, an article came out in Puerto Rico from a now friend of mine, Johnny Jackson, about a drag king troupe in Puerto Rico. And yeah, and
Oh, cool.
I was to go in the spring for vacation, but because I had just started performing, I was like, you know what? Again, I would never have done this normally, but I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna shoot my shot. And I reached out to Chris Grinder, and it was like, hey, I am a big fan. I just started doing drag, and I'm actually coming to Puerto Rico in a few months. Is there any possibility that you will have a show happening? And like, could I just do an open slot? Like, is there any way I could just share space with y'all? And he reached back out and was like, oh my God, blah, 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 blah. And like, lo and behold, shit happened. And I performed out of DC for the first time in Puerto Rico.
That's so great.
And kind of from there, first, hold on. I have to like, Puerto Rico drag performers are some of the most creative people I've ever met in my entire life. the art I saw just while I was out there, and then of course immediately started stalking all the performers. It's like beyond anything like I've ever seen. So shout out to Drag Kings PR on Instagram and really just all the drag performers in Puerto Rico. But also because of that, I was not only inspired to really like, I was like, whoa, I got to do something different with my art. Inspired by that to come home and start evolving more. But also that built my confidence because I was like, oh my gosh, I can do this. I can really, really do this. I can network at an XYZ and blah, blah, blah. And then, yeah, I applied for Austin International Drag Festival. And then I met so many wonderful people there and started networking with people from other states and blah, blah, blah. And really from there, I don't know, it's been a wild ass journey, but it has been such a dream.
Yeah, I mean, what I love is that you've taken adversity, right, and barriers and looked at them as not as barriers, right, but rather as, okay, they're detours. And sometimes the next step on your journey is actually not where you thought you were going to go, but actually took you somewhere even better, right? Which is not to say that those it's it's great that those barriers were there, right? But rather, I'm glad that you were able to use them to build something really awesome, you know? Yeah, and that's so cool. So, and one of the things that I've found personally in drag and in burlesque is that I love traveling because I also love I I did something similar about 6 months in. I was like, I'm just gonna start applying for stuff, see what happens. And honestly, I feel like leaving my city, even though, you know, there are some incredible people there, but leaving allows you to have perspective, right?
Yeah.
To see what other people are doing, to see other styles. Sometimes other cities are like, you're like, what have you been hiding here? How is this not where I am? You
How
know?
I felt about Puerto Rico.
Yeah. But it can be such a really cool learning experience, and it's a blessing and a curse, I think, and you can tell me if you agree, that so much of drag has had to go online now, and we're forced to interact with each other from different cities, because in some ways that creates new tensions. It also is, there's something missing when you're not in a space with different people. But on the other hand, you can interact, and I think we met in Drag Kings Unite. I think that was where we first interacted, and it was one of those things where it's like, we wouldn't necessarily have had the chance to connect and learn about each other or see each other's art without that, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of how I've made, honestly, I owe a lot of my success to that, I think. Because when I like look back on like my childhood and blah blah blah, like I was really one of those like the stereotypical like Tumblr kid. Like most of my friends have been online.
Yeah.
And so honestly, when I started drag, I was living in a pretty like small conservative area, about an hour and a half south of DC. So I had to drive a lot to DC. So since I couldn't do that off the bat, then yeah, I started diving into the internet like network. And so that's where a lot of my like main connections started, was through Drag Kings Unite. It's just like starting to message people, starting group chats with people, blah 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 blah. And like, yeah, it's so beautiful and also cursed.
Yeah, it can be really cursed. And I think especially because the internet, there's no context and people come from different viewpoints and backgrounds, and sometimes they're not speaking the same internet language, and you're just like, I like your art, but I hate your attitude.
Absolutely. And I'm the same about me. I totally recognize I come off as aggressive a lot of times. But it's, I guess to like answer that, I'm so fucking passionate. Like I take this personally because art is my life. Um, and I'm just really, really passionate about like the changes we are all capable of making. And I have that vision like constantly in my head of like what we can be. And so sometimes, I get a little ahead of myself. But it's just because I'm so passionate like about all of the like potential that we have.
Yeah. And, I think in a lot of ways being able to stand by your principles and to say, the standards to which I'm holding myself and others they're not unreasonable, right? And they're not out of reach. It's just a matter of like, do we all want to be held to this standard,
Right.
And
Exactly.
I don't know, I'll put it out there. Would we like to be held up to this standard?
We are asking you watching now.
Exactly. Yeah. So we have about 15 or so minutes left, and I want to make sure that we cover all of the things that are important to you. So, are there any aspects of your drag, your performance, your community, your experience that you would like to discuss or go deeper into?
Ooh. Gosh, there's probably like so much. Is there anything particular that you would know more about or had any questions burning?
Well, so I would love to hear a little bit more about like who Ricky is and how you came to like his slash their performance style. And also like any things that you might say to younger kings who are, I say younger, could be old, physically
Right.
older, but newer to the scene, like things that you wish that other kings knew about your drag or drag in general. So those are kind of my two areas, but I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess y'all should probably know about me personally. Yeah, so Ricky Rosé was my name was born, well, really, my name and my persona was born from my legal name. I don't call it my dead name because I was named after my abuela, and I do hold that close to me as part of my identity. So I will never like shy away from that. But I do prefer another name now. But yeah, back in 2010, I had this like, crazy summer of hanging out with all these friends at coffee shops and blah, blah, blah. And long story short, they gave me like a million different nicknames over that summer. Like, cause my nickname of my legal name is Rosie. And they just started coming up with these absurd like nicknames like Rosemary, Rosary, Rosie Posey, blah, 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 blah. And then came out one day Ricky Rosé, which is like a play off of like Rick Ross's nickname. And yeah, like Rick Ross is known as Ricky Rosé. And so when I started drag, honestly, like I truly feel like the ancestors like placed this in my lap and that I was truly meant to do this because no brainer when I started coming up with my drag persona that my name would be Ricky Rosé, but Rosé like the wine. Because immediately I knew that yes, I'm going to emulate masculinity, but I don't want to go like balls to the wall, quite literally. And I want that like option to bring in some of those touches of pink and femininity and like softness and such. And which is like rosé is champagne colored and like rose gold and blah, like the lavish shit. So basically, like I literally bring a little of my ghetto to glam and vice versa, in my name and my persona and my performance.
I love it.
It's a weird dream come true.
Yeah.
And I guess how that translates into my performance, oh gosh. Yeah, I love to play with the gender non-binary. And honestly, my heritage and culture play a huge part of it into my like performance as well. As y'all heard, I'm very proudly Puerto Rican. So oh gosh, where do I like even begin? Growing up, I grew up in the military, so I grew up around like moving around the states a lot. So I'm used to traveling. But we were pretty Americanized. We were pretty westernized. I mean, definitely like growing up inside the household, we were very Puerto Rican, but outside of the household, we were like very like assimilated into the culture around us because of my dad's career. So as I got older, I felt this like longing to feel connected to my ancestors and my culture. And so I started taking Spanish in school and blah, blah, blah. And just like really, really like did my own legwork to learn everything that I feel like I didn't get growing up. Um, and so, like, once I came into that and felt like I found a home in my culture, then yeah, it was like a no-brainer when I started performing that I was going to incorporate salsa, merengue, reggaeton, bachata, like all these Latin music styles into my performance because A, it's fucking fun,
Yeah.
and B, I'm a huge believer that anybody with a platform should utilize it to not only like speak out about things that they believe in, like different causes and such, but to like walk that talk. And so in my performances, I have done political, I've done funny, I've done like everything, but like my main goal is to, yeah, not only share my heritage, like my culture identity and my gender identity, but to celebrate it on stage. So truly, like at the end of the day, like that is my goal to bring visibility to people who look like me because growing up, I didn't see that. So I think representation is vital and important. And I don't know. Yeah, I feed off of that for 98% of my performances.
And I mean, one of the things that you said, and I think is worth just like saying over and over again, like even if you're performing something that's funny versus something that's explicitly political, like all art is political whether or not you intend for it to be. And so the very fact that you are incorporating those pieces of yourself, whether or not it's intended to make a statement in a very serious way, it does. And I think
Exactly.
that's so important to like always remember. Like when we create spaces and we bring acts to the stage, even if they don't say anything, they always say something.
Exactly.
you know so I appreciate you bringing that up, and I would like to continue reiterating it for all of everybody who's out there listening on a loop for all time.
Absolutely. Drag has always been political and will always be political, and our people has as well.
Yeah. So, as we're wrapping up, is there anything that you would like for other kings, whether they're newer or older or whatever, to know about drag, about you, about the art, or advice you've learned along the way?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much I could say. So I will start by saying, please find me on social media, whether it's Facebook or Instagram. And if you have any questions, I'd love to connect. But B, on the like actually going into it. Um, well, I guess I never disclosed like my actual identity. So I am Puerto Rican. I am non-binary, two-spirit. So I'm considered Afro-Latinx as well, with all of those intersections. Um, and oh gosh, yeah. So that's about me. But then I guess I would love to give advice to newer performers, like, A, welcome, and B, yeah, learn everything you can. Do what I did because it's been a dream come true. Like find those Facebook groups, utilize the search function.
Oh gosh, yes, yes. Do the work, friends. We won't do it for
it,
you.
it is a lot of work. I am still learning so much every day. So it's certainly not easy. You will not learn overnight. It is hard work. I didn't even get a chance to touch on a lot of like the hardships I've been throughout this journey, but it is hard work.
Yeah.
Um, but it's so rewarding. Especially knowing that you put in the work and it wasn't handed to you and that you worked for it, like do the work. But no, there are so many wonderful, beautiful connections out there. Honestly, primarily through Drag Kings Unite. I can't even like plug them enough. Because I met a lot of my best friends through there. And yeah, just connect with people, follow people, support and elevate BIPOC voices. Um, because we are regularly shadow banned.
Yeah.
I can't how many times like posts have just gone unliked because I'm shadow banned. And it doesn't even have to do with nudity. It's just because I'm brown and queer. Um,
It makes me crazy.
support and elevate BIPOC voices. Pay us. book us and connect with us because we have a lot to say. We have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience. I don't know. Yeah, I think I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's awesome. So, and I will make sure that all of your social media handles that you've shared with me are on the screen so everyone will see it.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Ricky. I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
No, thank you. Honestly, it's an honor. Thank you so much for sharing my story.
I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you liked it, why not rate, review, and subscribe wherever you feel like rating, reviewing, and subscribing. If you want to learn more about today's guests, head over to facebook.com/kingsvoicespod or check out the comments or the description in the YouTube channel, King's Voices Pod. There I'll post all the links to everything you want to know about today's guest, and you can find them from there. If you are interested in becoming a guest yourself, then why not shoot me an email at willxulydrag@gmail.com or shoot me a message on Facebook at facebook.com/kingsvoicespod. All right, so that's it for today. And remember, keep your toxic masculinity to yourself, but share your drag with the world.